Hello and welcome to Design 13. These kinship blocks are blocks 49 to 52 and I've done them in my usual setup of the square block, rectangle, a rectangle here and a square here. So all of my blocks look the same. I've got them all sandwiched and this is my practice piece with the blocks just marked out in basically a texture, a fabric marker. Alright, this design is going to be, well, it might be a challenge for some of you, and I'm going to put this here and we will zoom in. And this is the design we're looking at. I'm going to call it Hearts Aplenty, and we are doing a loop and a heart alternating. Now some may look at this and think, oh my goodness, that's a little bit too challenging. Some of you might be looking at it and thinking, fantastic, I am ready. So what I want to recap is that you have done everything that you need to do to be able to quilt this. We have done a change of direction when we've done our other loops. We've talked about moving across the block. See, I've written out my notes here. Moving across the block so that we cover our block so that we can travel across our quilt. We've done all of these shapes. We've done loops, we've done curves, and we've done points. So you have done all of these. We're just combining them in a different way. So I guess that's the breakdown. You have done, if you've been doing and following along with the tutorials, you've done all of these shapes. We are just combining them differently. So we're going to adjust this to fill the space, and we did that previously with our stippling and our wandering loops. So you can, we've talked about that. One of the challenges with this one is that we want to avoid repetition. So you might be able to see here, I've got a heart that's pointing this way, this way, this way, and then this one is almost the same. So we really want to try and keep this, avoid doing this. We don't want to have it all same the whole way across our block. If we end up with that, that's okay. That is something that will improve with time. Now, whilst overall what we're doing is we're doing a loop, coming into a point, doing our heart shape, which is some curves, coming out and doing another loop, and then doing another heart, another loop, and then another heart. If you find that you can't get to a spot where you can do a heart, this is where I want you to be a little more flexible and you think, right, well, I need to put in another loop. And I've done that a couple of times here where I've come into this heart, I've done the heart shape, I've done 2 loops because I want a heart to go back this way, so that it fills that space. And then again, I just want to travel a little bit more. So I've got some curves happening. My loops actually go the same way. And then I come into another heart. So don't be afraid to add in those extra loops, because keep in mind that once your quilt is done, these are details that people don't notice unless they're really looking closely. But in general, what they see is the general texture and that you've got hearts and loops. That have to be pretty pedantic to sit there and count whether you've got a heart and a loop following each other all the way across your quilt. So this is a technique that you can use so that you can get in and change the direction of your hearts so that you don't end up with them all in like a repeating fashion. That's something we want to try and avoid. So this is our design for today. I will go ahead and mark my blocks. Once again, we are now ignoring the piecing lines on our blocks. Let me just zoom out. So this is something that you can use just to quilt over the top of everything, and I probably will use orange thread on these blocks. And so you ignore your piecing lines. You can quilt the entire thing. I am going to leave my sashing free of quilting. So I will be doing the blocks starting here. This is block 49. Starting over here, I will leave my seam allowance free on the edges so that I can join my blocks. On these two edges it's okay because I've got the sashing, but on these edges I need to leave 1/4 inch free so that I can join these units at the end. So working across my block to here, same as we did in the previous videos, that sort of windy shape, this one here, so that we can work across. So this is the base shape for my quilting, and then my quilting will follow that shape to get across the block. So you'll see that when I mark. Then we'll get to here. I will sneak across the sashing here, fill this block, sneak across the sashing here, and then fill this block basically back to the beginning. Now with this one I will probably be using, the duo, otherwise I will use the styler, which will show up because this is not overly dark, so the blue will actually show up on this. I will see how I go, whether I need to mark it completely. So I'm going to do that on my test piece, see whether I need to mark it fully or whether I can just mark my vague direction lines. Being on a long arm, I would not need to mark this. On the domestic, I have found that I get a better spacing if I mark. So yeah, I will see how I go on the practice piece and let you know how that goes. But this is our design. We're doing hearts and loops, or hearts aplenty, and we're going to go ahead and just mark the quilts briefly and then get to the machine. Now, because I'm going to see how I go on my blocks, I will continue drawing here so that you can see the flow of the design. So this heart, I'm going to go around it, do a loop here. Maybe if I draw in my block, that might actually help. Sometimes it is easier to quilt within a constrained space rather than a broad, where you can go anywhere. Now, don't be afraid that, see, I've ended up with 3 hearts all sort of facing inwards towards each other here. And whilst we're alternating shapes in general, we're doing a heart, a loop, and then a heart, and then a loop, etc. Although sometimes we will do the double. Don't be afraid if your shapes end up next to each other. That's just part of the charm of the design, and sometimes it's just to break it up a little bit, put some space between it, is what we're trying to do by putting the loop in there. You can just do all hearts if you want to, but it can get a little bit crowded, so the loop, consider that as a spacer. And so we just want to fill our block, gives a bit of a space, and but don't be worried if they end up next to each other. There's still the loops there, and you know, over a larger space, you know, this isn't really an issue. All right, let's get quilting. All right, here we go with block 49. So we are doing Hearts Aplenty. I have done my locking stitches and I've got my needle set in the down position. My feed dogs are down and my stitch is slightly adjusted. It doesn't matter so much because your feed dogs are down. So we're going to start with a loop and then move into a heart. I'm going to see how I go without marking this, and hopefully we will do quite okay. So I'm going to sort of move over across this direction first. So I'm going to do my loop, coming into a heart. Right, so that's obviously going to be a bit of a point that I need to watch, is that I don't go over my line. And then I'm going to come back out towards the back. To another heart after that loop. Now you might notice I'm actually moving quite a bit slower. And so far all I've done is a loop and a heart and then a loop and a heart. And if that's what you need to do to get around your block and be happy with the result, then do slow that down so that you don't get stressed over it and dislike what you're trying to do. So that does seem to be a nice, I guess, point to stop, is to do the loop and then the heart. So I think I'll continue with that. Now I am trying to make my hearts even. You can see with this one here that this side is a bit narrower than this side, but in the grand scheme of things it's not too bad. Now this one here, I went out, just trying to show you, I've come out here and done my heart facing towards the top of the block, but I've still got this corner to quilt. Now by doing that, I've actually created a space that I need to work around, which can help you if you need to have your hearts going in a different direction. Because it forces you to go and fill that space. So I added in a tiny loop there. I'm going to change the fabric around this way. Now, because I actually want to get a little bit further away from this heart, I'm going to do another loop. As part of coming across my block, I want to start filling acrossways here, and then I'll come back and fill in here. So a heart and a loop seem to be the easiest way to do this design. Now this space here, you can see I've left this because I need to get back out to come back over here. So do keep your, leave yourself space to travel. my loops are of different sizes, and they do go in different directions. So that little bit there was probably not the most ideal, but that's okay. It'll be hidden in amongst the rest of it. Alright, we need to come down here now, get back in and fill this space here, fill across to the corner, and then back up to the end of the block. So I will do that, and keep in mind, I'm not moving fast so that I can make my heart shape as controlled as I can. It's not perfect, but it's controlled. There again, I've created a space I need to fill, because that is sometimes easier than not knowing where to go. Don't be afraid to keep stopping and changing directions. Alright, so I've only got this little bit here left to quilt. Keeping in mind that keep your machine going a little bit faster than I did a little bit earlier on. My machine I'd slowed it down, and it was certainly harder to quilt. All right, that's not too bad. I think I will keep going without the marking, just following my block. I don't know whether you can still see that on there. There it is, the blue line here. My travel line, I guess you could call it. Alright, so I will keep going and I'll film it for you. If I have anything to say, then I'll sort of come up with it, but otherwise it's just me quilting, so you can see the how I'm moving my hands and the shape that we're creating. I will say here that it doesn't matter how your heart looks. So you can see that this one here comes into a nice shape, whereas this one here, this is a lot shallower. Now if this is your style of heart as opposed to this one or this one, that's okay. That's your style, and you know, stick with your style. Don't let anyone tell you what a heart's supposed to look like. Sometimes the bit to remember, well, that's a bit harder to see when it's behind it, isn't it, is to make sure that when you get to the point that you come out at a different angle. So here are our blocks for Hearts Aplenty. This is the practice piece. You can see this has just created some great all over cover texture. You'll hear me say that word a lot. And here on the blocks, again, I've used a complementary thread, so it's not as obvious. You will notice it more on, obviously, on the contrasting fabric, and then on the same color fabric, it's just a bit more texture. So I will add some photos of these blocks, but I'm quite pleased with how they turned out. So this was, when I started, I was doing it quite small, well, smaller, and then these two blocks, I moved to do it a little bit bigger, which what that does is, in essence, it covers more ground a lot faster. So those are different ways that you can change this design. Obviously you can do it tighter and smaller. Sometimes that's easier to start with because you're only moving your quilt sandwich a small distance and you can concentrate on the shape. Once you've got that movement down pat, you can actually make them bigger, which will cover more ground. Something I've noticed, I need to have my machine going faster, so I'm getting some big stitches, so I do need to watch that. That's something you may find that you're doing as well, and it just, it looks a bit nicer when you've got more stitches. All right, so that is Hearts Aplenty. So you can see the texture here. My back looks pretty good. Obviously I can still see some of those larger stitches, but I'm not rushing at the point or around the curves of the heart or the loop, and so I'm not getting any eyelashes on the back. Remember I showed you where I'd done that previously, so that is something to be aware of. So there we go, that's Hearts Aplenty.